Well, howdy, Broncos country, wherever you are. Maybe it's late at night. Maybe you're in the mountain time zone like I am. That's late at night. Maybe you're elsewhere in the world and it's daylight. Maybe it's early evening in Hawaii. Wherever you are, it's good to have you here. If you're here live and if you're here at any other time of day, it's also good to have you. Thanks for stopping by my little corner of the world. Talk a little Broncos football here after this Acclimation Day. They've reported for training camp, but they haven't yet started full training camp work. Howdy there. Turn the music down. That canned music. When I'm with Cecil Lammey, of course, at Orange and Blue today, it's the canned rock music. Something a little smoother. I've actually been over at a production music house listening for different kinds of music. Maybe I'll find something different than the generic StreamYard music. But anyway, so it's Acclimation Day. Training camp, actual full tilt practice starts on Friday. Acclimation Day, the Broncos have two of these. They get ramped up after being off for a few weeks. Although players did plenty of working out, and we know Bo Nix gathered skill position players to get some work in, and we know they were doing a lot of their own individual work over the last few weeks. And certainly guys took some time to get some mental break. There were vacations to be had, that sort of thing for most of the players. And that's healthy because the grind of what you hope is the next nearly 7 months is as much mental as physical. But you kind of ease into it. So, for example, most training camp practices are going to feature at least 2 sets of 7-on-7 periods, at least 3 sets of team periods. They'll probably start with maybe 2 sets of team periods on Friday and then work their way up. There'll be multiple special teams periods in a typical practice. If you've been to a Broncos training camp, you're probably familiar with the structure. Wednesday, it was 1 7-on-7 period, 1 team period, 1 special teams period, and that's it. It felt like we had just started watching practice when one of the Broncos PR staffers was letting everybody know it was time to get ready for the post-practice press conference. So very much kind of ramping up, getting everything going. It's just kind of a taste. But we did learn some things. For example, we learned that Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton and PJ Locke, they're all coming along very well. We knew, of course, they were not going to start training camp on the physically unable to perform list, aka the PUP list. But we saw them out there working in 7-on-7, working in team. We saw, Dre Greenlaw full speed. We saw PJ Locke moving around nicely in his return from spinal fusion surgery. So a very good sign. Now for all of them, especially PJ Locke trying to come back from spinal fusion surgery, the big test is going to be pads go on, more physical contact. So we're going to learn more about him as the weeks go on. So that's a positive sign. But one thing we also learned today, and this is going to be the first soundbite that we play from Sean Payton, we also learned that there's going to be plenty of, he didn't want to use the phrase load management, but it really accurately describes what's going to go on with a lot of players, not just injured players as well. He talked about players being in 3 categories. I say injured, not injured currently, but coming off of injury. He he said he had 3 groups of players: players coming off injury, players with an injury history, and that players that fell into those categories, they would be on schedules that maybe had them not practicing all the time, that they would have their snaps monitored. Here's Sean Payton talking about just that.
Now, look, these players we're discussing, whether it's Dre or any of these guys coming back off of injury, we're going to monitor the snaps. We're gonna have a calendar where some days they're not going to practice. I'm telling you now because you'll ask me then. And it's 3 groups all the time. It's the recently injured, it's the injury history, and then it's the veteran group of players that we'll put together a little bit of a load management program. I don't want to call it that, but it's us looking ahead over the next 4 weeks and getting ahead of the practice schedule. So those guys would all fall into that.
I don't know why he doesn't want to use that term. I don't see anything wrong with that. Maybe it's just that's got negative connotations because perhaps in the NBA it's got the connotation of, okay, you're ducking an opponent perhaps, but it makes sense. And so I would say take any notes that we put out there, we being those of us covering practices, any notes that we put out there about players in practice, not in practice for the day, just take them with a grain of salt and really don't try not to make too much of them unless you see a pattern where a player misses, say, 3 days in a row. Then you've probably got a cause for concern. But if a player, say, doesn't do team reps, only does individual reps 1 day, 2 days, and then gets back to doing a full workload on the 3rd day, that would be along the lines of a veteran load management, even though I know he doesn't want to use that term. That would be along the lines of a veteran load management type of situation. So that's something to bear in mind, especially with all the chatter right now about Courtland Sutton and the contract and all that. So just be mindful of that as we go through these next few days. All Broncos players present and accounted for, except A.T. Perry, who, of course, is on the PUP list. He's the only player that has an injury right now that kept him off the field. Everyone else, good to go. Pro 16K asking, hey, more about Tom House. Okay. So Tom House is a longtime guru of pitching and has worked with quarterbacks as well. I mean, to go through the list of quarterbacks that he's worked with, it's a who's who. Some of the better names include Tom Brady, Alex Smith, Carson Palmer, Andrew Luck, Carson Wentz. There's even Tim Tebow on there. But part of the thing with Tom House is he focuses on recovery. He focuses less on mechanics, although that is part of it. I know he worked with Tim Tebow on mechanics, but more on repetition and recovery. He worked with being a former Major League pitcher himself, and it came up during the press conference today. Of course, one of the most famous things about him is that he was in the Atlanta Braves bullpen in 1974 when Hank Aaron hit home run number 715 that broke Babe Ruth's record. And he eventually became a longtime pitching coach. But over the years, he's become this sort of guru of movement efficiency in the throwing motion, working with it in baseball, and then transferring it to quarterbacks. There's been a lot of work he's probably worked more with quarterbacks over the last couple of decades than pitchers, as he's kind of transitioned to a different area. So that's it. I like this. I mean, what we see is Bo Nix seeking more information, seeking out Tom House, seeking out Drew Brees. That came up today, that he spent a few days with Drew Brees out in San Diego, picking his brain about the Sean Payton offense. That Bo has this innate curiosity for wanting to learn more, ingest more information, go through any means necessary to try to get better, to improve his game, improve his process, learn more. And so you have Tom House and you have Drew Brees. Drew helps him with the scheme, the offense that he's being asked to run, which is going to have more on the menu than it did last year. And then Tom House helps with the actual, not so much the mechanics, but just the functionality of his arm and keeping it fresh and keeping it from wearing down. That's the sort of thing that Tom House works with. I'm looking forward actually to asking Bo Nix when he does meet the media. The question I will probably ask him, if I can get it in, because some of those press conferences end up turning into shouting matches. As all of us try to get in our questions, it's come to resemble a White House press conference with a bunch of people shouting questions. I much prefer the types of press conferences where you raise your hand and then you wait for the mic to be handed to you and then you ask your question. I find those to be considerably more civilized than just barking out a question. I don't like the competitive environment, and and I get very frustrated when people talk over me. So anyway, I digress. By the way, appreciate you, Pro 16K, from being live in Thailand. Nice. It always humbles me a bit to not really humble. That's the wrong word. It's bad. That's the wrong word. It touches me. It just amazes me, actually, to see where people check in from and where they're watching this show, or not any show really. I've known for a while that the audience is global, but to be reminded of that is really cool. To know that Broncos country is worldwide, and to know that little old me is reaching people around the globe. Cedar Rapids in the house. Oh man, I didn't really stop there. I drove through Cedar Rapids just a few days ago because I made the drive from Madison, Wisconsin to Denver Saturday through Sunday. So I was passing through Cedar Rapids about 4:00 on Saturday afternoon. If Nick Benito had not had his charity event, I probably would have stopped in Cedar Rapids and gone to the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers at Cedar Rapids Colonel's minor league game, because I have a thing for baseball at all levels. So, but yeah, Cedar Rapids, good to hear from you, where it's even later than it is here. Todd says, hello, Broncos country. Hello, Todd. Good to hear from you. What's up, Mace? Good to see you, Ignacio. Good to see familiar names as well. And another familiar name that know very well. Yes, BK is very special indeed. Justin checking in from the Big Island, Hawaii. I've got to get to the Big Island. I've been to Maui. I've been to Oahu. I think my next stop, next time I'm out in the islands, hopefully I'll get there at some point soon, is the Big Island. And seems like I'm avoiding trouble with the I prefer to think of it as mood lighting. Anyway, Don Wilson, evening, I'll catch up. Yes. Roger, have you seen improvement with Bo's footwork under center from day one, 2024 to day one, 2025? Yeah. I mean, I saw improvement from day one, 2024 to October 1 of 2024. In fact, I would say that was probably the area where I saw the most immediate improvement in Bo Nix as far as turning him into first a functional NFL quarterback and then a good NFL quarterback. It was still kind of scattershot as you got through October. I mean, that's where you'd still see some missed throws that he could have had. You still saw it be unsettled, but it got better and better as the season went on. You saw, and the thing that Bo pointed out when I asked him about it during OTAs is he worked on it to a point where now he's not thinking about it. That's a key thing, that he was able to unlearn some of the habits, the ingrained habits that you can get away with at college, but you get to the pros and you can't get away with that because the margin for error is so narrow. Kind of takes me back to thinking about Drew Locke, how the coaches would work with him, and in practice, he would get things like that right. And then he'd get out on the field in the game, and he would revert back to the sloppy footwork and, and just winging it. Just winging it with his arm talent, because the arm talent has always been there with him. But when his feet weren't set properly, it affected his accuracy, and that led to spraying throws in a way that you can't get away with in the NFL. And you can get by with that in college, but not in the pros. And that, unfortunately for Drew, helped put a ceiling on what he could do, and is why here in his 7th season, we're still talking about Drew being a backup, as he is the number 2 in Seattle right now. Whereas Bo Nix looks to have more promise because he's been able to unlearn what he's learned and then basically turn these lessons into his new ingrained habits. Like he says, he's not thinking about those anymore. He's not thinking about how to spit the play call out in the huddle. He's doing it. And that now allows him, as he says, to focus on reading the defense, which gets him to another level of processing, gets him to another level of efficiency. Logan, with big contracts coming, do you see more surprise cuts than normal this year? That's a real good question. And I know surprise cuts, that was a subject that came up on the radio on our station 104.3 The Fan. Cecil, I know there's a segment that was posted on some of our digital channels. Cecil Lammey with his radio co-host Josh Dover talking about surprise cuts, and I think reacting to some discussion of potential surprise cuts. I wouldn't be surprised surprise cuts. There always is one or two. And when the roster hits a certain level of quality, and like you said, you're talking about the cap, you're maybe talking about trying to create some room as you've got some more extensions potentially coming in, that if you could create some room here or there, you might do it. I mentioned PJ Locke earlier, and he's coming back from spinal fusion surgery. It's a great story that he's come back this far. But the one thing looming over him is a not dead money, pardon me, a cap savings north of $4 million if the Broncos trade or release him. It sort of harkens back to the discussion about Tim Patrick last year. Remember that Tim Patrick took a restructure to increase his chances of making the team. It ultimately didn't help him. He was still released, but that came into play because if Tim Patrick had not taken the restructure, there was basically no chance he was making the roster because of the money that could have been saved from cutting him. He took that restructure to give himself a chance of making the roster. You almost wonder if PJ Locke takes a restructure to give himself a chance, because safety, backup safety, is one of the under the radar, highly competitive roster spots as training camp begins. Sean Payton has said special teams is going to determine those backup safeties. And that room is crowded with good special teamers. You have Delarian Turner-Yell coming back after missing a year, and he was a special teams leader back in 2023. You have Sam Franklin Jr., who they signed in free agency, and he is potentially a core special teams player. You have J.L. Skinner, who his career has not launched defensively just yet, but he really found his form in that phase last year. He's a hair on fire guy in that phase, hustling downfield. You have Devin Key, who filled in a pinch starting a couple of games, and he's another core special teamer in that room. And PJ Locke, before he became first a guy filling in for Kareem Jackson back in 2023 and then the starter last year, he was a core special teamer as well. So certainly he could go back and fill in that role. And boy, when you have Talanoa Hufanga coming off of the injuries he's had the last couple of years, if I were in the Broncos' shoes, I would sleep better at night knowing that I had a third safety like PJ Locke with quality starting experience before that injury struck him last year and he struggled a bit down the stretch. I would sleep better at night knowing that he was there, but you can't deny the cap space created if you move on from him. And you have to also consider the quality of those guys there. There's not enough there. You're going to cut somebody who has been very helpful for you on special teams in the last 2 years. And we know in Sean Payton's eyes, special teams matters. It's something that when he walked in here, he made a point of emphasizing. He follows the Bill Parcells philosophy of when you come into a building as a head coach, a place where you can make a massive immediate impact is in the phase of special teams. And he did. And then you keep emphasizing that. So to that end, the last couple of years, you found an all-pro returner in Marvin Mims Jr. You had Will Lutz, who last year had the most accurate season in field goal percentage for a Broncos kicker since Connor Barth back in 2014. So it had been a decade. And now, of course, you have Jeremy Crawshaw, who you draft to hopefully give you something more at punter. Make no mistake, special teams is incredibly important. And that's another reason why you should watch the special teams periods if you go out there and at training camp and make a note of who's with the first units on special teams, because those often end up determining who are the backups on this team. To touch on Crawshaw for a minute, I did ask Sean Payton about Jeremy Crawshaw because there was a punt period today. And it was interesting because the rookie had some blast. By the way, I mean, I take copious notes at every practice. Here's my notebook. Today's notes included some hang times. And, Parker Gabriel, the Denver Post, gave me a little nudge and a smile when he saw me, getting out my stopwatch on my phone, timing it because, hey, that's just what I do, right? And he had 10 punts, and most of the hang times are pretty good. He had some blasts. He had some that were north of 5 seconds. I mean, he can boom them. But there were a couple of ones that hit fat off his foot and, went off. I mean, it's, when when he's on, those punts are majestic. But, every so often there's one that just hits wrong. And you got to be consistent. That's the thing that Darren Rizzi and Sean Payton know that is the thing that Jeremy Crawshaw has to work on in order to really reach his potential. But so far, Sean Payton likes what he sees, even though he knows the consistency has to improve.
It's kind of like right now, the fireworks, there's some booms, and then every once in a while there's one of those, we got to work on the ones that just that go right. We got to get those handled. It certainly is the leg talent. You can see that. It's exciting.
Imagine saying it's exciting about a punter. Maybe if that gave me a smile when he said that, because I thought I was the only one who would use the word exciting to describe a punter. Special teams matters. That's where Cecil and I disagree. He doesn't give special teams much mind. For me, when it's a punt or a kickoff, I sit up straight in my chair and pay attention. I don't know why. I've just always been that way. Always paid attention to the kicks and to the kickoffs and the punts and the field goals. I don't know. I'm weird. I'm just a weird guy. That's okay. You're here with me, keeping me company. Donald, continuity and consistency. Yep. He's a rookie. There's room for him to grow. But when you see the coach getting excited about you like that, the potential, that's a good sign as well. There was also a moment between drills, saw Sean Payton having a conversation with Pat Bryant, that when the coach has that kind of investment in you, like he believes in you. Like you look at the way Sean Payton talks about Crawshaw, the smile on his face, there's a sparkle in his eye. You look at the way Sean Payton kind of interacts with a guy like Pat Bryant, like there's that same kind of thing. You can see that there are players that he really believes in. Like he does believe in, he's got his team. Like it's 3 years in and he's got his team and he's got his guys now. Like I think he's pretty excited. Someone's like, Mace loves Crawshaw, you low key man crush. Hey, I just want to see what somebody with a leg like this can do at 5,280 feet above sea level. That's the thing. I've wanted to see what a guy with the driver in his bag that could grip it and rip it, so to speak, could do in a situation where, okay, the offense goes nowhere. It's going to happen sometimes. Even if the offense is great, there's going to be a drive where it just peters out, 3 and out. You're back at your 16-yard line, and you just need to tell the punter who's back there with his heels on the 1-yard line, all right, just knock the ever-living crap out of the football. Kick it high, kick it far. And based on some of the punts we saw today, it might be where we're just looking up, and if we get one of the good ones and not one of the ones that went, as Sean Payton went, whoop, then we might be all like, ooh, yeah, might be something majestic. Might be something majestic to watch. Todd Ostendorf. Mace, who's your favorite kicker all time? I do kind of hate picking between guys, but I mean, I guess the obvious choice is Jason Elam. I mean, 15 years that he was here, I had the chance to cover Jason for 6 of them. Really liked him. Just always great to deal with. Intelligent, good at explaining like the technique of kicking. I had the chance in the 2000s, but first here in Denver, and then I covered the Panthers for a couple of years. So I had Jason Elam, and then I had John Casey toward the end of his career in Carolina, and just the two of them, the time they were willing to give to kind of explain not just the technique but their process, and both of them shared with me how, as they got older, how much more time they had to put into pregame prep, how much time they had to put into stretching. And of course, I remember toward the end of his career with Denver, Jason, when they called a fake field goal, it was against, I believe, Seattle in 06. He got the first down, but he had to pull up. I think the hope was he'd get a touchdown. The play was called Rainbow Wright. It was called Rainbow Wright because Jason Elam went to Hawaii, Rainbow Warriors, right? So he sweeps right and he gets the first down, but he pulls his hamstring. Of course, by then he's a 14-year veteran. The muscles maybe don't respond the way that they used to. And Jason pulled his hammy, and he wasn't quite the same kicker the rest of the season after that. So, Todd, not sure how many kickers get in the Hall of Fame, but Elam would be one I would say should get consideration. Yeah, but he should, but the bar is so high for Hall of Fame kickers that it's probably not going to happen. He's in that next tier. Like the Hall of Fame kicker tier, it's someone like George Blanda, who, he was also a quarterback, but for his time was a great kicker, the dual player. Also, led the league and was all-time scoring leader for a long time. Somebody like Jan Stenerud, who kicked for 20 plus years and really was the first great soccer style kicker. Not the first, but the first great one that really took the accuracy of kicking up to a higher level and kept that accuracy into his 40s. A couple of his best seasons were in the early 80s with Minnesota and Green Bay. Not that anyone cares here because this is Denver football, but if I were doing Tampa Bay football after dark, I would tell a story about how Jan Stenerud contributed to John McKay retiring from coaching. He played a huge role in being John McKay's final straw before he walked away in 1984. Morton Anderson's in the Hall of Fame. Jason probably kind of falls in that next tier. Unfortunately, it's a high standard. Rich Carlos, oh yeah, Mr. Barefoot. Unique, just one of the most unique players in NFL history. No doubt about it. It's actually funny to think too. The 80s were a weird time in football. If you're my age, you grew up with it, so you sort of accepted it as normal. But there may not have been a weirder decade in the NFL than the 1980s. 2 strikes that shortened the season, one by 1 game, one by 7 games. The 87 season featuring 3 weeks of replacement player football that included some teams that had players crossing the picket line, and then one team, Washington, that didn't have any players cross, and they ended up going 3-0 and having that famous win over Dallas on Monday Night Football. barefoot kickers being a thing, a reasonably common thing around the league in the 80s. A kicker being MVP. Think about that. There was a year, 1982, the year that a strike shortened the season to 9 games. A place kicker was the MVP of the NFL. Just sit back and think about what sort of circumstance would have to happen for Will Lutz to be the MVP of the NFL. I mean, you couldn't imagine it, right? And yet in 1982, Mark Mosley was the NFL MVP. The 80s, like, again, when you're living in it, you think of it as normal. And when you're a kid and it's really the first thing you know about the game as you're falling in love with the game, you really just think that's it. That's just the way it is. And then you don't realize really until you grow up how profoundly weird a decade the 1980s were in the history of this sport. Just absolutely mind-boggling. Jermaine, thanks, Mace. Couldn't sleep, and Denver football after dark is on. Yeah, that's what we're here for. We're here for the insomniacs. We're here for the people around the world. Here for, I'll admit I'm doing this for myself. I told a couple of friends today, I'm putting in solo reps. I need to get better as a solo broadcaster. I think I'm pretty good doing a show when somebody is prompting me. I'm weak doing a show where I'm carrying it on my own. And that's another reason why I want to do this. So I'm here in my test kitchen on this channel, putting in reps. And I appreciate all of you helping me with this. Just talking ball, just letting it go, seeing where the conversation goes here. So Logan, Broncos have a hard time finding and developing inside linebackers. They really have. I mean, as far as a guy they've developed, they developed Josie Jewell. He played pretty well, although you can't tell the story of Josie Jewell, unfortunately, without talking about injuries. And sadly, now we're talking about concussions with Josie Jewell. The Panthers released him this week, and concussions are a reason. Talked about needing the roster spot, but even other injuries. Think back to when he was injured in week 2 of 2021. 21 looked like it was going to be Josie's breakout year. He played a monster game week 1 against the Giants. Looked like this was the launching point. It's his 4th year. It's his contract year. This is when it's all coming together for Josie. And then he gets hurt. I believe it was covering a punt. It wasn't even on defense. And that was it for him that year. He gets re-signed. He plays a couple of more years here, but that was maybe the fork in the road on him, like becoming a standout player instead of just being a pretty good player. It's been a while since the Broncos had a really dominant inside linebacker. That's what you're hoping Dre Greenlaw can be, just that holy terror who goes sideline to sideline. They've had some tackle monsters. They've had some good players. You know, Todd Davis. You think of Brandon Marshall, although he wasn't quite the same after his foot injury. And I mentioned Josie Jewell. But you probably have to go back to Danny Trevathan early in his career for a guy who was just like who could be a total beast. So I'm excited about Dre, but man, you just got to keep him healthy. Brent, my 2-year-old is keeping me away for this one. On that note, who in Broncos history made the most effect for the team in 2 years? Okay, like just had the most like impact, like in a short span, or if you're with me, Brent, kind of do like just kind of elaborate on that, because I want to answer that, but I'm not really quite following what you're asking there respectfully. So just elaborate on, if you're watching this, just elaborate on that, because I'd like to answer that, unless you're talking about a guy who's just here for 2 years and had an impact, in which case Logan might have the answer, Brandon Lloyd. Although if we're talking about impact as far as being remembered, I think the answer to that, Brent, 2 years, wouldn't it have to be Tim Tebow? I mean, we all remember that, right? I mean, to this day, if you bring up Tim Tebow's name, it's going to provoke an argument, even though he was only here 2 years. And to this day, home or away, I don't go to a Broncos game without seeing a Tim Tebow jersey. I mean, to me, that's sort of a sign of having an effect, although there are other reasons for that and his impact. But how many other players in Broncos history were here for such a short time and still see their name echoing like that? I mean, Brandon Lloyd, hey, I loved covering him. Great player. Okay, Brent, elaborating. Most impact on the team to make them a contender. Well, then that wouldn't be Tim Tebow. Okay. So most impact on a team within 2 years to make him a contender. Well, I mean, Peyton Manning would be an example, although when he got there, they were 8-8. They were already a playoff team. See, same like now, John Elway came in to a 2-7 Bronco team, and they were 13-3 his second year. But that 2-7 team that he came into, it was that, again, the weird 1980s. 2-7 was the strike year. It was, I can't put much stock in that. And in 81, the Broncos were 10-6, and in 83, they were 9-7. So 2-7 was just a weird outlier year that didn't really reflect where that roster was. And the 84 season, John Elway is young and does some good things. 84 was a lot of opportunistic defense. That defense forced a ton of turnovers. It wins a game like the Monday Night Football game in Green Bay, where they returned 2 fumbles for touchdowns in the snow right out of the gate. So, man, that's a good question. 2 years, most impact, make them a contender. Ooh. Okay. Even though they were 9-5 when he got there, and they go to 12-2. I'll say this from conversations I've had with players on that team. A lot of guys from the 70s have told me Craig Morton had an extraordinarily profound impact on the Broncos coming together in 1977. That they went from a team, they had a great defense already, but Craig walking in there changed the dynamic completely. So my answer for you, Brent, it's going to be an old school answer. And he did it in less than 2 years. He probably did it in an off season through a preseason. Of course, he wasn't handed the job. He had to earn the job. One of the guys with whom he was competing was Steve Spurrier, the eventual University of Florida coach, the HBC, the head ball coach, as we used to like to call him. So, yeah, another good example. Denver doesn't win the Super Bowl without DeMarcus Ware. Yeah. And you know what else? I don't think Von Miller has the type of career he had without DeMarcus Ware walking in. DeMarcus Ware really got him back on the right path. Remember, Von Miller in 2013 struggled on the field, had an injury, also was suspended for 6 games. Von Miller's career could have gone in an entirely other direction, but they bring in DeMarcus Ware, someone who Von Miller didn't just respect, but loved growing up in the Metroplex and loved and revered. And he listened to D Ware. And everything started to fall into place. Man, D Ware, another one of my favorite guys that I've covered. That's a good answer, Todd. There, Sean Payton. That's a good answer. Todd, why Alzado? Why did the Broncos lose Alzado? There was a contract dispute back in '79. In the middle of that contract dispute, Lyle Alzado fought Muhammad Ali at Mile High Stadium in the summer of '79. Not as nearly as many people showed up for the fight as they expected. Lyle Alzado personally took a bath on the fight, financial bath. Yeah, that was a pretty ugly, acrimonious departure for Lyle Alzado back in '79. Ah, man, good answers, good conversation. See, I like the fact that I have no clue where this show is going to go when I start. I mean, we start off talking about today. We talk about things that we learned, how we learned about what we're going to see in terms of load management, even though Sean Payton doesn't want to call it that. It's still the best term for it, though. And we just go in a completely different direction. No, that's cool. That's the fun part of it. Like, it's, we just meander. That's what you do. I don't know. That's the way my brain works at the late night. Just meanders all over the place. Oh, goodness gracious. One more thing I want to I wanted to throw in there. Just this is Sean Payton. He was talking about some stuff like I talked about last night. The you want to focus on the moment and the rest will take care of itself. You want, like I said, you want to have the goal of the Super Bowl, but you also have to focus on the moment. And to some degree, Sean Payton talked about that, but he also said you can't be afraid to think about the big thing at the end. It was his last response, is the last thing he said at a very long 27-minute plus press conference today. No players talked today, but he talked for a while. So here's Sean Payton getting into that.
Briefly yesterday, I outlined a few things that are coming. But it starts more with the division and seeding and we have to start faster than we have the last two. And so you try to, how do I say this? You try to point at the nearest goal, and some of these ones that are more visible, but you can't be afraid of talking about the end game. That's got to be a comfortable subject. And then you've got to be comfortable saying, hey, look, this is what's required. And, you don't get a best of 7. But I think you start with some of the objectives that are a little bit more clearly visible in the short term.
I like that. So it's basically you have the long term. Don't be afraid to talk about that, but the short term. And he came back to the thing about the division, and that's, I think, a really something to focus on. If you get to the point where you get off to a good start and you're in a good position, start by focusing on the division. Winning the division increases your chances almost immeasurably of being in the Super Bowl. If you don't win the division and you're starting off the playoffs at home, again, I don't think this team's going to win 3 in a row on the road in January. That's just reality. You can hope. Maybe you have a run like Tampa Bay did in the 2020 season, but Tampa Bay did that in the COVID year when there were few or no fans in the stands. They go to Washington, they go to New Orleans, and there's no one there. They go to Green Bay, there are 6,000 people at Lambeau. That's not really going on the road. If the Broncos don't win the AFC West, and let's say they're the 5th seed and they go to Houston or Indianapolis, okay, they can win that one. But then you got to go at Kansas City or at Buffalo, at Baltimore. I mean, winning 3 consecutive road games against division champions, whoever they are, is darn near impossible for any team. So win the division. That's the thing. Win the division. Does Bo use a VR training system like Jaden Daniels? Good question. I'll try to shout it in. I'm gonna ask about Tom House, but at some point I'll ask Bo about that if that hasn't been asked. But I'll try to find that one out. Archer Dryer, can we get a 27-minute Rosberg podium talk again? I haven't shared a Rosberg soundbite in a while. Always makes me feel good. Jerry brought us some wisdom. DR Edmonds, I know no pads, but it's reached the point where I wonder how Q Robinson fell to the 4th. Lack of film. He was a backup at Alabama for 3 seasons, and then he gets out there. He only starts half a season, and then he's injured. So he doesn't play that much. The interesting thing, usually Alabama has a lot of churn because they recruit so well and they're always recruiting the best, that there are a lot of players who transfer out of Alabama's program and end up starting at good programs elsewhere. Drew Sanders is an example. He goes in at Alabama. He ends up starting at Arkansas. So a lot of guys like Q Robinson typically transfer out and end up starting and playing extensively somewhere else. Q stays at Alabama as a backup, finally gets his shot last year. And then because of injury, doesn't last very long. It's to the Broncos' credit that they looked at what film they could get. They did focus on the special teams, and there was some promise there. He showed a lot of dynamic potential there. Scouts liked him a lot. And that's also credit to the scouting staff. They do their homework. They have a lot of contacts on the coaching staff. They have contacts around the program elsewhere. They find out what kind of player he is. They find out how coachable he is. I know someone mentioned this. I do have a little itch in my nose. Sorry about that. So, yeah, just a little. I had a summer cold a couple of weeks ago. Summer colds are the worst, especially when you're on vacation. So, Damari Mathis might be the 6th cornerback. No reason to keep him. Yeah, and here's an interesting thing. There are 2 guys with a number 27 right now. Usually you see double up numbers for guys that are rookies. You've got J.K. Dobbins and Damari Mathis with 27. That's interesting. We were joking. That may not be a good sign for Damari Mathis that he's sharing his number with a guy who's basically a lock to make the team. So keep an eye on that. Jermaine, Mace, I'm in the building. I had to share that because whenever Steve Atwater greets me, that's how he greets me. Mace is in the building. That's what he always says. Makes me feel good. Steve Atwater's like maybe the greatest human being I know. Really nice guy. Logan, I hope Bo Nix is amazing this year just to shut up Nick Wright. Me too. Why does Nick Wright hate Denver teams so much? Why? What's the deal? My hypothesis is that when he was in junior high or high school or something, that he had a girlfriend who was a fan of the Broncos, and she dumped him in an incredibly unceremonious way, and it stuck with him. And he just developed this irrational hatred of anything Denver because, of course, for years he's talked down about Nikola Jokic as well as anything Denver he hates. Because it's not simply a I like the Chiefs, I hate the Broncos. It's something deeper than that with Nick Wright. Frankly, I think it makes his show unwatchable. But hey, some people think I'm unwatchable too. So, anyway. Can't sleep and stumbled upon Broncos after dark gloriousness. Yep. Well, I appreciate you joining me for this. I'm pushing an hour again. And I said to myself I was only going to go 30 minutes. Wrong. Brent Taylor, Nick Wright, single worst sports broadcaster. Yeah. I don't get the appeal, man. I don't get the appeal. Pros 16K. Elway destroyed his youth. Yeah, there's something there. There's something there. I don't know what. Something deep-seated. Can't explain it. Nick Wright mentioned went to the games. Broncos beat the Chiefs with Elway at the helm and fans at the game talk trash. That can't be it. That can't be the only thing. I mean, it's got to be something more. Got to be something more. But yeah, Denver sports fans do not like Nick Wright at all. It really, I have to say this, when I saw the Fox Sports cuts, and unfortunately they claimed my coworker, Mark Schlereth, someone I think all of us here in Broncos country think highly of as a broadcaster and as a person. And I thought to myself, yeah, you guys cut stink and you kept Nick Wright. No wonder I don't watch your channel. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that. Marquee Sports Denver. Why pineapple on pizza is top 3? Some things I just can't explain, but they work. It does. I had never had pineapple on pizza before I was 18 years old, and I was a freshman at the University of Missouri. And I tried it at Shakespeare's Pizza in downtown Columbia, Missouri, and I was hooked. Pineapple and Canadian bacon. And it's not pineapple and ham, pineapple and Canadian bacon. There is a difference. That's the go-to. Pineapple and Canadian bacon, and it's exquisite. Todd Ostendorf, love stink. Yep, I do. I do too. We all do. Good human being. Kenneth, pancakes, waffles, French toast. Rank them, Mace. French toast, pancakes, waffles. They're all great. French toast is just amazing. It's actually my favorite of those 3 to cook. Pancakes, they're incredibly versatile. Waffles, not as versatile. You do love how the syrup kind of gets into the grooves, obviously. But I think French toast you do it right, it's decadent. I had French toast I went to this place for brunch in Richmond, Virginia. I was back in my hometown a couple of weeks back, and we stopped for brunch at this cafe out on Patterson Avenue in the West End, and had this just exquisite French toast. Unbelievable. So I'm Canadian bacon. Aloha from Honolulu. Aloha to you as well. I'll be wearing an Aloha shirt tomorrow. Logan, maybe if Nix throws 80 touchdowns, he'll make it on a second tier of Mahomes Mountain. Marquee Sports. Pineapple and pepperoni is better. Okay, I'll admit. I've never tried that because I just sort of rolled with. I've done pineapple and ham, but I've never done pineapple and pepperoni. So, all right. You sold me. I will give that a shot. I don't know if I can convince my daughter to give it a shot. She loves pepperoni pizza and she loves pineapple and Canadian bacon or pineapple and ham. I will try to see if she will put them both together. Just once. Just once. See if it passes her test and see if it passes my test. We'll come back and give you a report. Probably that may actually be something we do the weekend of the Colts game. Maybe on Saturday night we'll go out for pizza because I think she's going to be going. She's attending that game. We're all going to be in Indianapolis and give you a report on that one. So, really quick, new stadium news. Nothing at present, and I think it might be a little bit quiet for the next at least few weeks on that. We might be kind of hitting a period where maybe not much comes up here until maybe we get into the season. If I had to guess, I think it does probably end up being Burnham Yard, but we'll see. There are maybe some complicating factors there that could come up. So I also, and this is just me looking at it from a distance, you've got the development that's going to go up around Ball Arena. You're also going to have the new Denver Summit FC stadium that's going to be developing at Santa Fe Yard, and they want to do some stuff around that as well, although it won't be that extensive. I just wonder how many stadiums / developments the urban core of the region can handle. That's my only concern about the Burnham Yard area, given what we're going to see over toward Ball Arena, Elitch's, and then what we're going to see down at Santa Fe Yard. But the Broncos are the 900-pound gorilla, and they've got ownership, and they've got people with the wherewithal to get things done. Monte Cristo. Well, I love the food discussion that's going on in the YouTube chat now. This is just absolutely brilliant. Marquee Sports should be talking more about Wattenberg stats on the roster. UFA next season. If we don't extend, should we look at potential trades? Good. That's a low-key one that we haven't talked about a lot. I've asked coaches about Wattenberg. They're excited about him this year, excited about his development. They love the continuity on the offensive line. You heard Mike McGlinchey refer to it this week, how everybody on the two deep is back. He's never seen that in his career. I can't recall a year where the entire two deep on the offensive line was back. It's exceptionally rare. And for a unit of the team that thrives on cohesion and chemistry, that's massive. But they have selected guys who can play center in the late rounds of the years that have followed, right? They picked Alex Forsythe, who did start some games last year when Wattenberg was injured. They picked him the year after Wattenberg. Forsythe, better run blocker than pass protector. Wattenberg, better in pass pro than run blocking. Last year, they picked Nick Gargiulo, who spent the year on the practice squad. They didn't pick one this year, but Clay Webb was one of their high priority undrafted signees. He's going to provide a push as well. So they keep investing in those types of young interior offensive linemen. They keep bringing in guys that they like. There's a churn. So it keeps the pressure on. You keep the development going. And that ends up being a factor in decisions you have to make. If there were no salary cap, the choices would be easy. But there is a salary cap. I mean, you imagine what the Walton Penner group could do in a sport without a cap. That's why people who are Rockies fans, I think, look longingly at the Walton Penner group and wish they would buy the Rockies. But they're in the NFL where you can manipulate the cap to a degree, but you can still only do but so much. So Powers has that huge contract. Nick could take his spot, Nick Gargiulo. Yeah. And you get past another year and then you start getting to a reasonable dead money point. But Ben Powers had a better season last year than he did in 2023. He actually scored well on the ESPN analytics that we often keep citing as well. I'm glad Markey. Yep. Clay Webb, like I mentioned. Yep. Can't forget him. And I think you've probably got just a little bit more optimism. I've got to see more from Clay Webb. I got to see him with pads on. Got to see what he does at this level. The film on him at Jacksonville State is good, but the leap from Conference USA to the NFL is considerable. So I gotta see him out. I gotta actually see him out there, but we'll see. Checking in from Cosmopolis, Washington, land of the Legion of Boom. It's been tough as a Broncos fan out here. Feels good to have a competitive team again. Yeah, I get a lot of that there's a lot more pride now. It's been a lot of years in the wilderness. People are sticking out their chest a bit more, feeling good about their Broncos. That's always wonderful to see. I've got the old school pennant there behind me, another old school pennant there. Little thing of Old Mile High there over my shoulder. Yeah. It's good to kind of look at those and see that this team is worthy of the legacy of those past Broncos. At least last year's team. We're fixing to find out if this year's team can be worthy of that legacy, because in spite of the progress, everyone still starts at zero, as the cliche goes. A couple more. You have to wear your Aloha shirt on Friday because in Hawaii, they call it Aloha Friday. Yeah, I will. But it's training camp. I wear them most days anyways. But yeah, I will wear one on Friday. And Roger asking about next year's draft. What position be first round pick? Wide receiver, guard, tight end, nose tackle. If I had to venture a guess today, I would say tight end. If I had to say one potential position, I'd say tight end. And if I had to guess one guy, I would say, ooh, man, it's tough. I'm not going to narrow it down to one guy. I'm just going to say tight end. I'm going to cop out. I'm going to cop out on that. Oh, real quick. Drew Sanders getting first team reps. Yeah, it was during OTAs and minicamp because you had, of course, Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw out. So Drew Sanders and Justin Sternad working together quite a bit. It was a good opportunity for Sanders to get plenty of reps. Any concerns with RJ Harvey and his fumble issues in college? Yeah, that's sort of the one knock on him. Concerned with fumble rate on other guys more than RJ Harvey, though. And I think he's going to be okay. I haven't seen that manifest yet. He looks to have a pretty good security taking the ball through tight areas. But now we're going to see what happens when the pads go on. I know I say that so often, it's kind of a cliche, but we'll find out a little bit more. But so far, he looks pretty secure, pretty mindful of protecting the football when he goes into traffic as well. That's something that I've seen watching him out there so far. So nearly an hour and 10 minutes, and I need to get some sleep because another practice in the morning. Broncos will be out there 10 a.m. close practice, acclimation day number 2, and then training camp practice number 1 on Friday. Thanks for joining me here on Denver Football After Dark on this Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Thanks for following me on YouTube. If you want to get notified, know when the next show is going to be, because it could be anytime late at night. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so as we say over at Orange and Blue Today, so you never miss a vid. And join Cecil Lammey and myself on Orange and Blue Today Thursday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll wrap up everything from the last day before training camp. And I'm happy for Cecil Lammey that he wasn't able to watch Wednesday. He won't be able to watch Thursday because he's in the radio studio, but he gets to be out there live on Friday and going forward watching practice. I know he is itching to see these guys as I've been able to see them. So be sure and check out Orange and Blue Today as well. Thanks for joining me here on Denver Football After Dark, and I'll talk to you next time. Oh, wait. You can see I'm raw at this because I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you next time here late at night on Denver Football After Dark.